Okay.
Hello, welcome to Northern Light Spiritual Center. My name is Reverend Vaughan Amaré, and I am the co-minister here with Reverend Michael Amaré. And out there in our Zoom presence, we have the founding minister, Pamela Grace Beatty. We at Northern Light Spiritual Center identify as a community of people dedicated to using spiritual and practical principles to create lives we want to live. Northern Light Spiritual Center offers practical and spiritual tools to make positive changes in our lives. We at Northern Light Spiritual Center acknowledge our presence here on the traditional and unceded ancestral lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and Salish Coast peoples. These people are still here, and we join with them in how they continue to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. We seek to resist the erasure of Indigenous histories as we work towards honoring and inviting the truth. Please join me for our opening song, In This Very Room, by Ron and Carol Harris. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough peace and quite enough power to walk through our every fear. For Spirit, sweet Spirit, is in this very room. In this very room.
Good morning. And now's the time we set aside for a few moments to center ourselves, to ground ourselves in exactly where we are. So I invite each of us to try and find a space where you can, feel comfortable as you can be. And just allow yourself to settle in, to wiggle around, to find that sweet spot. And just take a nice few deep breaths in, breathing in and release. Breathe in and release. And as we release, I invite us just to release everything that has come before this perfect moment. To allow yourself to let go of any worries, woes, stress, anxieties, because you can pick them up later if you choose. But for this moment, I just invite you to be in this moment, to experience the perfect now. as you are following your breath in and out, I invite you to think of a time when you went on this great adventure. Just pick an adventure and allow yourself to feel what that adventure brought up in you. Excitement, joy, thrill, and in this adventure, allow yourself to repeat that adventure in your mind.
Says there's been an error on Zoom. As you're moving through that adventure, realize that you can take time, any time of the day that you need to have an adventure. Allowing yourself to have these feelings, to recognize these, because you can tap into these memories of these adventures and free yourself from whatever is going on around you. Because life is an adventure, and we're on an adventure each and every day. But sometimes we need a little something to center us, to calm us, to relive it again. And so when you're comfortable, I just invite you to wiggle your fingers, your toes, open your eyes and come back to the room. And so it is. And at the moment, we're having a little trouble connecting to Zoom. So
this is for you on Facebook. Our reading for today is called Every Day is an Adventure, and it's by Joseph Worthland. Be honest. It gets to you, doesn't it? You feel trapped in a life of monotonous, everyday routine. One dull day merges into the next, each equally forgettable. The months slide past until you look up from your desk and suddenly another birthday's here. So you avidly consume programs and articles on fearless adventures and bold entrepreneurs who risk everything to pursue their dreams. And you follow them hoping someday to have your own stories to tell, your own daredevil memories to post and tweet. But instead, you end up doing nothing but beating yourself up at your seemingly lack of adventurous spirit. But maybe it's time you stopped beating yourself up so much. But if adventuring isn't all, what if adventuring isn't all it's cracked up to be? What nobody tells you about living an adventurous life. At 19, I was also frustrated with the lack of adventure in my life. And then I met a crazy-haired, free-spirited who catapulted me out of my everyday humdrum life and into a world of adventure. It was amazing. But just like all those photoshopped, celebrity cardboard cutout Facebook pages, another side exists that few people confess to. You see, in between exploring mountains, deserts, and rainforests, and sleeping under a million twinkling stars were days of hunger, exhaustion, and illness. In between meeting strangers who became just like loving family members within hours were days of arguing with officials, being turned away by border guards, and being stoned with rocks in remote valleys with no hope of outside help. In between the adventure of building and sailing our boat were years of living aboard with no shower or heating, even though the second winter hit sub-zero temperatures. And even though we have a world record that says we went further than any other fools had gone before. We never knew where our next bed or meal was coming from the whole time. Are we glad we did it all? Absolutely. Was it like the movies? Not a bit. And our forays into business have taught us that the life of the entrepreneur is no different. Every day is just as uncertain. Every venture, a high wire act without a safety net between possible riches and certain bankruptcy. After 10 years of living such a lifestyle, the constant uncertainty and discomfort had lost its allure. I wanted a regular, a regular income and the luxury of a toilet roll on a daily basis. So I settled down into a normal, quote, normal life. But within 2 years, that started to feel humdrum and stale. The lack of stimulation felt suffocating. But then I started searching for adventure in everyday life. And I swiftly found that opportunities exist to explore and experiment everywhere. You just need to be open to them. Actually, can I share a secret with you? My life now is way more adventurous and happier than before we decided to settle. See, life isn't about the extraordinary once in a while. Life is about the everyday. And the everyday can be extraordinary. And here's how. Explore your world. You can become an everyday explorer without leaving your home and loved ones behind. I believed adventures only awaited in exotic lands. Then my eyes were opened to the truth. Everywhere is somewhere. 1. Take a different route to work. You've no idea what you'll discover. 2 years of commuting busy roads was enough, and by taking a slower route, I discovered a beautiful house to rent on the doorstep of my workplace. I now get up earlier, but I can take a safer, quieter route to work. 2. Discover an unexplored world. Take a sabbatical from your usual haunt, a traditional meal, and immerse yourself in an unknown culture. Explore the history, art, and music. Maybe even learn a little of the language. Then there's find a buried treasure. Pull on your buccaneer boots and realize this truth. If you search for the hidden treasures in your own life, you'll discover wealth far greater than any rusty chest of tarnished gold. First thing is, uncover your forgotten skills. We all underestimate what skills we have and what we can do with them. For instance, have you ever arranged a yard sale or got the neighborhood together to raise money for a local project or to clean up the area? If so, you probably have forgotten skills in project management, delegation, budgeting, cooperation. What other forgotten skills could you uncover and have an adventure with? Number 2, unearth your hidden talents. You've no idea what you're capable of until you try. Say yes to things you might have previously said no to. Try your hand at a different sport, or join your local amateur dramatics group. I once helped finish a book for a friend who was woefully behind on the publisher's deadline. Who knew that this previously undiscovered talent would lead me to write a book of my own and become a published author? 3, bring your buried blessings to the surface. Embark on a voyage of gratitude. Discover your dull life is actually filled with bright blessings. You just need to recognize them to transform your everyday. And then turn your ordinary into extraordinary. You are too extraordinary to live ordinarily. You truly are an adventurous spirit. That's exactly why you must live your own life of everyday adventures. You just have to unleash your curiosity. You can stay in your home, your job, your life. Your adventurous spirit can thrive right where you are now. Pick an idea from the list that lights your adventurous torch. Start with one and build in some others when you're ready. Get out there and experiment, explore, and experience. Go make every day extraordinary. And so it is.
It seems like the internet is down.
Can be. I've got Wi-Fi on here.
So we are in the month of May,
Oh, that's right.
And May has a brand new theme. The theme for this month is Holy, Holy Uprising. So I have come up with a song in response to the Holy, Holy Uprising. It goes, I rise up from where I have settled. I rise up. I rise up from my tears and my cries. I rise up to show all my mettle. I rise up to 1,000 more tries. This uprising is lifting my life. This uprising is giving me joy. This uprising is bringing new peace. This uprising surprises. So please join me as you feel comfortable with the melody. I rise up from where I have settled. I rise up from my tears and my cries. I rise up to show all my mettle. I rise up to 1,000 more tries. This uprising is lifting my life. This uprising is giving me joy. This uprising is bringing new peace. This uprising surprises. You rise up from where you have settled. You rise up from your tears and your cries. You rise up to show all your mettle. You rise up to 1,000 more tries. This uprising is lifting your life. This uprising is giving you joy. This uprising is bringing new peace. This uprising surprises. We rise up from where we have settled. We rise up from our tears and our cries. We rise up to show all our mettle. We rise up to 1,000 more tries. This uprising is lifting our lives. This uprising is giving us joy. This uprising is bringing new peace. This uprising surprises. I rise up from where I have settled. I rise up from my tears and my cries. I rise up to show all my mettle. I rise up to 1,000 more tries. This uprising is lifting my life. This uprising is giving me joy. This uprising is bringing new peace. This uprising surprises.
Still not connected, right?
No.
Let's see if we get here.
Well, that song, Holy, Holy Way, is by Ricky Byers. And I wanted to draw on that as for starting this month. So with ancient wisdom and with new thoughts and new actions guiding us, how do we rise up? How do we get ourselves engaged? The first thing that I'm going to recommend is that we start by remembering that life is an adventure. Now, the Latin root of the word adventure is venire, which means to arrive or to come. And if we go back to the song itself for some further cues about living in a holy, holy way, living in a holy, holy way, serving in a holy, holy way, loving in a holy, holy way, that gives us some guidance, some points. So I want to talk about loving in a holy, holy way. I want to talk about living in a holy, holy way. And I want to talk about serving in a holy, holy way. Because I think that using those to orient ourselves gives us a firmer sense of direction. So, we're lying in bed. How easy is it to get up? You're in bed, you're warm, you're comfy. Now maybe it's a little easier if you have a nagging bladder. Or you just know, I've got to get to the bathroom or I'm going to die. There can be these internal forces that let us know that, yeah, bed is safe, but it won't continue to be safe for long. What I invite us to do is, how do we start our day embracing it with love for that day? How do we look at the day and let ourselves detach from an expectation that this new day is going to be like every other day that we've ever faced? We can get out of bed that held us. How do we get out of our own way? How do we get out of our own selves holding us back? Well, one proposal for letting go of ourselves holding us back is to consciously embrace our lives as an adventure. That we may be going on a quest, that we are looking to see where will we find the divine throughout the course of our day. And if we are seeking to find the divine, then we might engage in that day in a more loving manner. Okay. So we might engage that day in a way that is distinct. What if we are to look? What if we are to consider all of the things that we encounter with a love? So most of us get out of bed and most of us change our clothes. Now I know with the pandemic, there's been a lot more pajama wearing lasting throughout the day, but even with pajama wearing, we might change our pajamas. We might decide that it is worth looking a little different. So how do we look at our clothes? How do we look at what we put on? With a sense of love, with a sense of gratitude. Some of the inspirations for that might be to when we first saw that article of clothing. Were we struck by the color? Were we struck by the texture? Were we struck by the fit? What was it? What was it that drew us to that? What is it that has us keeping that particular article of clothing? When we put on a pair of shoes, what is it that says, I still like these shoes? I still appreciate these shoes. If we get up, many people start with a cup of coffee. Now, there used to be a coffee commercial where you would go to the fields of Colombia where the person was picking the coffee beans off of the plants. Maybe we could give appreciation for the people who picked those coffee beans that make up our beverage. Or picked those tea leaves if we're a tea drinker. Or picked the cocoa beans if we're having hot chocolate. The farmers who might have helped with the development of the eggs. The farmers who might have helped with the production of the pigs or the cows or whatever it is that contributed to the meal that we're eating. To the fields of grain that might have created a piece of bread. Michael oftentimes is an English bagel. An English muffin.
Well, could be English bagel.
Could be an English bagel. I was at a retreat with a woman named Reverend Jackie Allen. And during that retreat, she invited us for half a day for 12 hours to just be in silence. And in that silence, to just become more aware of everything that surrounds us, of everything that is a part of our life. I found myself, what was in place in front of me were this dinner with salmon and with green beans and with potatoes. And I thought about all of the factors that contributed to this salmon that was on my plate. I thought of all the factors of those green beans and those potatoes. Not only the place where it started, but it had to get to me somehow. It underwent a process where it got transported from one place to another. How might I take a moment and pause in thankfulness, in gratitude for that traveling? To recognize that the clothing that we wear, the food that we eat, it's all been on an adventure. And there have been people involved in it, people contributing to it. We don't often think about adventure in those terms. We've come to equate adventure in different ways. And I'm proposing that we let ourselves start with adventure at a very simple level. If we go to the grocery store, the adventure of simply smiling at someone. It's a little harder now with our masks on, but we can still have a smile in our eyes. You know, we all know that there's a difference between that smile in our eyes and the glare in our eyes. How can we consciously wish the other people in that space with us well? And as we're wishing them well, as we're sending that out into the world, what if we're changing the adventure of the world? by our wishes, by our consciousness. Now, it's that I'm going to love in a holy, holy way, and I'm going to live in a holy, holy way. Now, oftentimes these days, adventure gets associated with risks, right? If I'm going to go on an adventure, there are some risks involved. There are some risks inherent in this adventure. And in today's times, the motif also associated with adventure is the whole realm of superheroes. Now, in earlier times, those bigger-than-life beings, they might have been angels. There are stories in the Torah where this guy named Jacob was the younger of I believe wasn't he a twin?
Can't remember.
Can't remember, but he had an older brother, and he was the younger brother. His father preferred the older brother, mother preferred the younger brother. And he ended up getting his father's blessing because his father had gone blind, and his mother equipped him with a sheepskin so that he put it on his body so that he would feel hairy like his older brother. And he got the blessing. Now we all think, well, what's the big deal about getting a blessing? Who cares? It's a blessing. Dad can give the blessing. Dad can give the blessing to who he originally meant. Well, in those times, that wasn't the case. You gave the blessing, it was done. Your blessing was over with. And then there was the threat that the older brother really didn't care about the blessing, and he was going to take out his younger brother. So the younger brother went off on his own adventure. He ended up going to stay with his mother's brother, and his mother's brother had 2 daughters, and he fell in love with the younger daughter, and he asked to marry the younger daughter. And the father, his uncle, said, you can have the younger daughter, but you've got to work 7 years for me. You've got to work 7 years, and then you can have the younger daughter. So he worked for 7 years, thinking that he was going to have the younger daughter. He got married. He thought to the younger daughter. He got up the next morning and realizes he was with the older daughter. And his uncle said, well, this is just how it's done. We don't give the younger daughter first before we give the older daughter. Now, we can begin to step back and say, my gosh, there's so much that's wrong here in this story. There's so much that's just not right. What I would also say is that the story tells us a little bit about karma. This character, Jacob, kind of had life treat him back the way that he had treated life. So in our adventures, are we thoughtful about how we engage with life? Are we deliberate with how we engage in life? Now this example, this story of Jacob, another being that he encountered, at one point, Jacob encounters an angel. And angels were kind of big, supernatural figures. And that angel wrestled with Jacob and broke his, I believe it was his hip. It was kind of a big deal. And in that breaking, the angel renamed Jacob to Israel. One of the notions that story recognizes is that it is in our brokenness that we come into our identity. pausing there because think about it. None of us really like to think about brokenness as something that we want to happen in our story. We like to think of stories as one of the teachings in religious science is perfect, whole, and complete. Well, we always want to be perfect, whole, and complete. We don't like the idea of imperfect or unwhole or incomplete. And yet, a central feature of human life is around our brokenness. And that's where I'm going to jump a little bit because we don't really talk about angels that much. It's not like pressing on our daily attention. Much closer to daily attention is the idea of superheroes. Yesterday on the television, there were a series of movies that were being presented. There was Superman, and then after Superman there was Wonder Woman, and then after Wonder Woman there was Aquaman, and then it was going back to Superman. And all of these are part of what's the world of the DC Comics. One element about superheroes is that these are beings who have been transformed. And when I talk about being broken, that includes the idea of being transformed. Now, many of us may have heard the idea of a diamond. A diamond is this transformed piece of coal. It is the hardest formation. It is the hardest substance that we know about on this planet. But it went through this transformation process. Many of us have heard the story about the butterfly. You know, the butterfly to the cocoon, the butterfly, the caterpillar doesn't just like crawl along and then some wings sprout out of it and then it's fine. The notion of that caterpillar is that it builds a cocoon and it literally dissolves. It literally changes. So there is, in many of the superhero stories, this change. And living is about contending with change. So a couple of superheroes that undergo some pretty pronounced changes are characters like Iron Man. Iron Man, Tony Stark, his change was that he inherited a company from his dad and he was very bright. But he was also a big playboy. He was bright, so he really didn't have to think about much. He was able to just kind of do things. He could take things very much for granted. He got kidnapped. And in that place of being kidnapped, and he got kidnapped after he had a bomb, one of his own bombs, blow up. And end up having metal pieces that were trying to make their way to his heart. And he was fortunate enough to encounter a scientist who had also been kidnapped, who set up a device that would protect his heart from those metal shards. And Tony was told by his kidnappers that he needed to recreate one of his weapons. So he told them all of the things that he would need, and they gathered all of those things, and they were looking at the things, scratching their head a little bit, because the things that they were bringing him didn't make them think. They were kind of wondering, how is it that these things are going to make that? And if they had had a scientific advisor, the scientific advisor could have said, no, it's not. So what Tony made was he made his Iron Man suit, his first draft of it. And he escaped. Another superhero who underwent a change was Captain Marvel. She was a pilot. And unknown to her, the person that she was piloting was this woman from another planet, a woman from another part of the universe, who had identified that what her people were doing, they were setting about to destroy people who didn't want to simply lay down their lives and roll over and give things. And the woman who became Captain Marvel, the way she became Captain Marvel is that this rocket that this scientist created blew up. And Captain Marvel took in that power. She transformed by taking in that power. Another one that lots of people know are some of the Spider-Man versions. Now, Spider-Man, there's a new version of Spider-Man pretty much every 5 years. There's a new Spider-Man, and each version there's kind of like, okay, it's a radioactive spider, or this chemically infected spider, or this combination of spiders who were genetically engineered so that some of them were really strong, and some of them had this great webbing, and some of them were able to imagine distances and all of this stuff. And the most recent version is the Spider-Verse, that not only in our universe there is this path for the Spider-Man, but there are parallel universes where there's all different ways that Spider-Man can show up. I speak about these different superheroes because we can look to superheroes as tales about how we might choose to contend with our own suffering in response to transformation. A couple of others that we're going to talk about were, like there's Dr. Strange. Dr. Strange was a brilliant surgeon, but he was so brilliant and he was so egotistical that the precipitant for his tragedy was he's not paying attention. He's driving in his very expensive car, and he slips around a corner and crashes. And it takes hours to find him because he decided to go a scenic route instead of just the easy way to get where he was going. And one of the colleagues that he had put down was the person who ended up doing surgery on him. And the surgery was not at the level that his expectations were. So Dr. Strange goes through all of these medical procedures. He finally spends through everything he has. And then he finds out about somebody who had come to him seeking surgical care. And Dr. Strange said, I'm not going to work with you. Why? Because I can't make it perfect. I won't have anything but a success story for me. So the person who was healed was not healed through Dr. Strange. So we start to see that sometimes transformation doesn't happen in a way that we imagine. He ends up going to a teacher in Timbuktu. Literally Timbuktu. Khan. And what he finds is that there's a power inside. What he finds is that there are parallel universes. Well, who's to say if there are or aren't parallel universes? That there's a multiplicity of realities that are co-occurring. But each one of us is a universe of adventures that are occurring. how do we look at that with reverence? Because that's what he eventually learned. To look at his own experience with reverence rather than disregard. Now, I've talked about living and how these different superheroes lived and how Jacob, who became Israel, lived. In the Holy, Holy Way song, there's, I want to serve in a holy, holy way. Some of the superheroes that come to mind either come into that service by seeking it out. The Black Panther. In order to become the Black Panther, he had to go through a ritual. He had to go through something and transform, but it was voluntary. There was a sadness to it because his father had passed, and he had to fight for his right to be the leader. But it was voluntary. He could do that. In the case of the others, there were accidents that happened. I want to propose that service is voluntary. We may end up doing it, because that's what happened with the first set of superheroes, but there's a value to choosing to serve. And in that choice, something new gets called forth from us. The Black Panther chose to serve. Another hero who chose to serve was Captain America. Story of Captain America is it was a scrawny boy. So little that he kept trying to go into the draft office and get taken. And they were like, no, reject, reject, reject. He tried all the offices all over the place. And as he went into one before his best friend was going to leave, there was a doctor there as part of a special plan. And the doctor wanted him. Not because he was the biggest, not because he was the smartest, not because he was what would obviously be the best, but because he was so committed. He was so invested in trying and trying and trying and trying. That was what captured the doctor's imagination. As we live, are we willing to keep trying and trying and trying? And the other element of service that gets told by other superheroes is the notion of self-discovery. And you know these characters. Superman ends up here an orphan. He's orphaned from his entire world that has been destroyed. And he's found and he's raised by people who love him, but he feels so different. How many times do we find ourselves in a setting where we know we should fit, where people are caring for us, but we feel like they don't know all of that we are? And we wrestle with that. We wrestle with letting our fuller selves develop. In some of the Superman stories, his dad is his adopted dad is a little bit apprehensive. Don't show off too much. Because the world isn't kind to people that it sees as different. How do we just blend into the background? How is it that we don't make waves, that we don't ruffle anyone? Isn't that a huge thing facing us now? We're at this time where finally enough black and brown people have been murdered relentlessly by the police that finally there's like this national and international awakening that's like, this is wrong. And people have begun marching it. And it isn't just one group of people, it's a whole collective of people. And how is the establishment responding? They're making those gatherings, they're making those protests illegal. Which is ironic. We're living here in the United States, which is supposed to be freedom of expression. Well, it's fine if I have my freedom to use a gun. It's fine if I have my freedom to take my car and drive into you and harm you on your protest, but I'm going to make it illegal for a protest. In the story of many of the superheroes, there's this element of self-discovery. That as we face these circumstances that are occurring and that call forth a response, we have the capacity to respond with service. And we have the capacity to respond to love. And we have the capacity to ignore the threats that are designed to shut us down. The big thing that popped up this past week with President Biden's State of the address to the nation, to Congress. The response from the Republican senator was, it's not a racist country. We don't live in a racist country. And yet this same senator is the same one who has said, last year I was stopped 7 times. So how do you hold that in your mind in a way that makes sense? I was stopped 7 times, and yet there aren't racist people? We aren't a racist country? And maybe the way to hold it is to be able to say, okay, individual people may not be racist, but we're still living in a system that is inured in racism. It's one of the reasons that I brought to Northern Lights the idea of the value of declaring a land tribute. I was at a racial equity training yesterday, and one of the presenters talked about how our own culture is our medicine. And we have white people in this country that are just talking about white culture. And the fact is that there's no white culture. There's Irish culture, which is the skin tone of Irish people is most typically white. There's Germanic culture. There's English culture. There's Dutch culture. There's French culture. There's Spanish culture. There's all kinds of different Caucasian cultures. But we've let all of that drift aside, and we let ourselves be whitewashed into just a monolithic, this is what America is, and it's white. This notion that white is the height of all possible expression. And it's this failure to regard with awe and wonder the vast diversity of the world. One of the appealing things to me about the science of my teachings was that it said whatever you come to with, wherever you come from, there's a beauty and a value to that background. And maybe you want more than just that background. There's a beauty to my Catholic traditions. But there's also a darkness to it. And if I only laud what's beautiful about it, and I don't acknowledge where it has engaged in harm, then I'm not honest. And that dishonesty doesn't deserve to be rewarded. So I'm going to go back. There is the living our life as an adventure, and we've got it in 3 ways. How do we live? How do we start each day with a sense of gift, with a sense of wonder, with a sense of joy? One of the schools that presented is like, how do we embolden people to find their joy and say that finding your joy is important and it's really central? What a difference do you think it could make if going to school is supposed to be about finding joy? Did you ever hear that when you were a kid? Did you ever hear that? That going to school is supposed to be about joy and discovering your joy? What, in my mind, what a huge opportunity if going to school is about me being equipped to find my joy. What if this teaching is about equipping us to be bold on our adventure to find our joy? How do we choose to live? How do we choose to be whoever we are in the midst of our brokenness? We might not like our brokenness. This isn't about celebrating being broken, but it's about how being broken can create new opportunities. That it doesn't have to be the end of the story. And we're coming up, this is May 2nd. On Tuesday is May 4th. And many people have adapted the notion of May 4th to May the 4th be with you. In that first story of Luke Skywalker finding his identity, it started when his home, the place that he knew, the place that he was a little bored of, it got blown up. It didn't start from a joyful place. He didn't want to leave because he didn't like his aunt and his uncle who had raised him. He was just tired of it. But the story said it that they're blown up, they're killed. That's a tragic start, but the tragic start, tragedy doesn't have to be our end. Tragedy can be our beginning. And it can forge our heart into something new. And the third part of that song is, I want to serve in a holy, holy way. How do we step forward to become servants? How do we say, yes, I will become something new to do this? Or I will find what I've always been, but never could dig down deep enough to discover it. One of the superheroes that I find particularly inspiring about this was Thor in the story Thor of Ragnarok. And in Thor of Ragnarok, his hammer, the hammer that he's always had, is destroyed. And he thinks, well, how do I go on? How do I go on with my life? That hammer was my everything. And he had lost his hammer, he had lost his father, he thought everything. But as he's about to be killed, he hears his father's voice saying that hammer was only a tool for you to focus. It was a tool to focus your power. It wasn't the source of your power. No. And he asked him the question, what were you? Were you Thor, the god of the hammer? And he was answered, Thor was the god of thunder and lightning. And with that, Thor commanded his power over the elements. And he was no longer lost because he remembered who he was. So we live in a holy, holy way. We love in a holy, holy way. And we serve in a holy, holy way. So, an affirmation. I live in a holy, holy way. I love in a holy, holy way. I serve in a holy, holy way. I live in a holy, holy way. I love in a holy, holy way. I serve in a holy, holy way. And one more time. I live in a holy, holy way. I love in a holy, holy way. I serve in a holy, holy way. And so it is.
Thank you, Reverend Vaughan, for always an uplifting message. No matter what the message is, you find a way to make it uplifting instead of down and depressing, fire and brimstone. And especially about the three parts in the song, bringing them forth about living, loving, and serving in a holy, holy way. And finding new adventures each and every day. Because we can get bored. I know I get bored in everyday life, especially in the last year or so, where you're very limited in what you can do and what you can't do. But we are creative individuals. We have the creativity within us to create an adventure, even if it's just in our mind. So I give thanks for that. I give thanks for everyone who was trying to get through on Zoom, and we had some issues here with that. And I give thanks to people that are watching on Facebook. And we will be here again next week. Hopefully everything will be straightened out. And I just want to give thanks for this holy ground that we stand on. Wherever you are standing on holy ground because you make it holy. Your presence makes the space that you are holy and sacred. And so I give thanks for being able to live a holy, holy life, to love in a holy, holy way, and to serve this community, to serve the world at large. And so I give thanks for this day. I give thanks for each and every one of you. And I call it good, and so it is.
So it is.